Welcome to Prolific Figures, presented by the United States Air Force Academy Way of Life Alumni Group. WOL places special emphasis on diversity and ensuring the success of future and current cadets and alumni. On this platform, we will engage with influential Black alumni who will share their perspectives on life before, during, and after USAFA. Join us on a journey of fruitful conversation and the celebration of USAFA's Black prolific figures.
Good evening, Prolific Figures family. My name is Nkosi Stewart. I'm a 2018 graduate, and today we have our guest, Colonel Candice Pipes. Colonel Pipes is currently Chief Manpower and Personnel Division, U.S. Special Operations Command, J1 Directorate. She served most recently as the Deputy Chief, Military Compensation Policy Division, Headquarters Air Force. She earned her Bachelor of Science degree in English in 1998 from the United States Air Force Academy, a master's degree in English from Louisiana Tech University in 2004, and her PhD in English from The Ohio State University in 2010. Colonel Pipes began her military career at the United States Air Force Academy in the admissions office, working diversity recruiting, She then entered her primary career field as a personnel officer at Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico, Kunsan Air Force Base, Korea, and Barksdale Air Force Base, Louisiana, where she led fighter, supply, and maintenance squadrons as a squadron section commander and served as the 2nd Bomb Wing's executive officer. After her tour as an instructor in the Department of English and Fine Arts and completion of her doctorate, Colonel Pipes served as the commander, AFIT Force Support, head of the Department of English and Fine Arts at the United States Air Force Academy, and commander of the 30 Force Support Squadron at Vandenberg Air Force Base, California. She is married to Lieutenant Colonel retired Steve Pipes and has 3 children, Thair, Sienna, and SJ. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome you, Colonel Candice Pipes. Ma'am, do you have anything to say that I missed?
No, I think that about captures it. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Nkosi.
Yes, ma'am. We couldn't do a prolific figure series without including Colonel Pipes, so we're super excited to have you and get on your calendar.
No, great to be here.
Yes, ma'am. And you're also the first woman on our series, so.
Woo, woo, represent.
Yes, ma'am. So each series, we want to start off with a focus quote, and we'd like you to share your thoughts on it. So the quote I have here is, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere," by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Would you like to share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the full quote, I think that's the part that most often gets quoted, and I had it, as my Facebook banner for a long time there, just to kind of keep myself grounded. But the extended quote says, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all directly." And I just think, in this moment that we're living in, where we're this kind of super globalized society, where there's so much happening, I think to be mindful of the fact that when something is happening, across the pond or in a different country or down a different street, and it's easy to kind of remove ourselves from that and say, hey, well, that doesn't impact me. So, we flip to the next screen and kind of distance ourselves from that's a wrongly placed kind of dismissal of those things that are happening in the world, right? And we have to be mindful that all those things happening across the globe, all those things happening down our streets across this nation impact each of us directly, right? So that's one part of it. And then the other part of it is that I think it also speaks to the power of one to affect change. And right now that resonates with me where I am in this kind of season of life where I've long stopped worrying about my own kind of individual accomplishments. And I'm now thinking hard about how do I leverage the success that I've had, the positions that I'm in to do the greatest good to help others. So I keep this quote handy and always near to me to keep me motivated in the right direction.
That's awesome, man. Thank you for sharing that. And I agree. I struggle with that sometimes too. Sometimes, life can get very busy for you and you just don't really realize what's going on in the world. Like even, around election time too. I often got just so focused at work, I wasn't even paying attention to what's going on in the world. So no, I agree with you, man. There's a lot of injustices going on in the world, and we need to make sure we're aware of everything so nothing slips through the cracks.
Yeah.
So next part, we like to start with we call our cookout questions or comfort questions, where we just ask you some questions and just facilitate a little conversation.
Okay.
So the question I got is, what are 3 books every Black woman should read?
To have me narrow it down to 3 books is very hard. So I'm going to take 3 books that are near and dear to me. The first being Their Eyes Are Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. It's such a fun novel. There's so much kind of feminist empowering happening there. There's identity discovery. There's so much happening in the novel that I recommend that for all Black women. And then I couldn't not recommend a Toni Morrison book. So I would say either Beloved or Sula. Sula was the first book that written by a Black woman that I ever read. And that happened when I was a sophomore at the Air Force Academy. And thank goodness, my English 211 instructor thought to assign that to us. But that was really kind of the first time, and I've said this in different forms, but that was the first time that I really saw myself reflected in literature. And it was life-changing. I mean, literally life-changing, because from there is when I really started thinking about being an English major and studying literature and making that, a life's work. So it was profoundly important to me. But I also recommend Beloved. It's a classic. And then as a third one, and I would say this one is especially for Black mothers raising Black girls. And I suggest that the way to really read this is with your daughter out loud together. And it's called Brown Girl Dreaming, and it's by Jacqueline Woodson, and it's beautiful. It's just such a wonderful book. It's one of those that you would just return to over and over again. My daughter has read it cover to cover at least 5 times, probably more. But it's just a wonderful book. So I definitely recommend that.
Wow, that's awesome. That's some great recommendations. And, I have to write some of those down too and make sure I share them with some of my friends and read them myself. All right, moving on a little bit. This one's a little funny question. What's your favorite meal at Mitch's during your time at the academy?
I mean, I feel like it's everybody's, right? Like, wasn't it chicken tenders?
Yes, man, them chicken tenders is good.
I think it was chicken tenders. Like, oh, that was like, yes. And if it was on a Friday, it was that much better, like.
And I think it came with the mac and cheese each time, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Yep. And then biscuits and gravy in the morning, like that, for breakfast.
Yes, biscuits and
gravy.
That
was a good day.
Yes, ma'am, I agree. But I think I would add, I really like the meatballs. Like when they brought out the meatballs, everybody had the little subs. I wouldn't use the subs because it was kind of heavy, but I pour a little hot sauce on the meatballs and
I'd have to ask my husband if that was new. I don't remember the meatball subs.
It was good. It was good.
Maybe y'all got extra special stuff, at way after we were gone.
Yes, ma'am. All right, then the last comfort question I got is, so what do you love most about being a Black woman officer?
Oh, wow. So I think there's a lot to love. I think I do love those moments where I can sense that people are surprised at me, kind of surprised that I exist in the space that they're operating in, and that I exist, what's the word I'm looking for? I exist boldly, right? Where I'm not willing to not be myself, right? So I'm kind of authentically who I am all of the time. And you know me well enough to know that sometimes that's, very pointed, depending on what we're talking about. So I do love those little twinges of surprise I see in people as they're responding to me. I think I also love how my presence changes the dynamics of a space. Um, and I recognize that and I pay attention to that, and I'm fully aware that that I probably change how people talk or what they say, what they don't say, things like that. And so um, I choose to decide that's a good thing, that's probably for the best in most of those situations. And then I think I like the opportunity to be able to offer what I think is most often a unique perspective, as someone who has lived. I mean, I think we all bring those unique perspectives, but there really are so few of us, especially Black women 06s, right? That are operating in these spaces. So I think I bring a unique perspective. Um, one as a professional, obviously, but also as a wife, a mother, an educator, all of those perspectives into the conversation. So I think that's necessary, and I appreciate having the opportunity to operate like that in those spaces.
Wow. Thank you, man. That was powerful. We really appreciate those words, and all the Black women in the audience listening. I hope you taking those words. That was great. Thank you so much, man. So now we're going to hop into really the meat and potatoes, our content for this interview. So for the first question, we're gonna start off with, swim class. I know a lot of people talk about swim. So if I'm not mistaken, you swam at the academy, right, ma'am?
I did.
Wow. So you just touch on how was that experience just overall?
Yeah, it was an interesting experience. And it was a bit challenging, but it was, some of it was my fault in the sense that I was burnt out. I really, swimming is one of those sports. I think they've ranked swimming as one of the top 3 hardest sports to train for. I think it's swimming, wrestling, and boxing. And I was a long distance swimmer. So my event was the mile. And so I put in hours and hours and hours a day, miles and miles and miles of swimming a day. And so by the time I got to the academy, I was a little burnt out with like the 5+ hours a day of swimming. And it was just I was kind of at that moment. And then to then not have a team that fully maybe accepted me and wasn't super welcoming probably didn't help that. I think I probably could have turned that corner a little bit easier if I had a little bit more support there. When I look back now, and I've since have relationships with some of those teammates, and I recognize that I had friends on the team, and then I think I had people who were kind of intentionally keeping me to the margins. You know what I mean? And so that experience didn't last long. I swam most of that first year that I was a 4 degree there, and then a couple years later, I was recruited to play rugby out of one of my English classes, and it was a direct order, like, "Hey, you be at the rugby fields today." And I said, "Oh, okay." But I immediately felt like I belonged. I immediately felt like it was home, and that was a fun couple years that I spent with the rugby team.
That's awesome to hear. That's awesome. I actually played rugby myself for about 2.5 years. It was a fun time. I really loved the just team environment and everything.
Yep.
But back to swim real quick.
Yes.
I know swim class is a struggle for many cadets of African American descent. And I was one of those cadets. I was in swim class for a 1.5 years. And if you know my friends, I think there was a point in time I was in the pool more than the swim team for like a month, just really just trying to get there to pass. So with that being said, like what advice would you have to any cadets who are currently in the class or, about to go through the class? Like what advice do you have for them to prepare for it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you just really talk to it, right? You got to spend some time in the water. I think a lot of what happens is, people just aren't comfortable being in the water. It's not, doesn't feel like a safe space to be in, right? And so you have to just spend some time getting used to the water. And I was talking to my husband earlier today. They've added swimming at the prep school, which I think is huge, right? So they're and that's how they're going to do it, where they're trying to build comfort in the water for those that are not comfortable. And I think that's going to greatly help people when they get up to the hill, right? But so getting comfortable in the water is just part of it. And then recognizing that a good swimmer doesn't fight the water, but uses the water to their advantage, you know? And so you have to kind of change the frame that you think about the water with. Like, the water is not your enemy, the water is your friend, and you have to use it to hold you up and use it to move you farther in the pool instead of fighting against it. You know what I mean? It's like a mindset shift. It's there to help you, not to hurt you. But it takes practice. Like, you just got to do it. And I get it. Like, for me, my swimming pool is the bike. And so I've thought for years, like, hey, I could do triathlons, you know, that would be fun. I run, you know, marathons, I can swim. That bike is, you know, like kryptonite to me, you know what I mean? And so everyone has counseled me, you just got to get on the bike and you got to do it consistently. You got to get comfortable on the bike. And so, you know, that's one of my challenges.
Okay, that's awesome. That's awesome. And that's a good transition into my next question. So what do you tell yourself when you're being faced with challenges?
Yeah, I think I try to be self-reflective. And when I am self-reflective, I recognize that most of the time when I'm facing challenges, it's because I'm getting in my own way. I'm procrastinating. I'm, you know, doubting myself. I'm making excuses. I'm maybe not putting in the full work something requires. And so when I recognize this, I end up having tough conversations with myself, not unlike the conversations I have had with many cadets along the way, right? Where where you got to stand in front of the mirror and ask yourself some tough questions, like, what is your motivation here? What are you doing? Like, you know, are you willing to put in the work to do this or not? David Goggins, I don't know if you're familiar with Goggins. Are you familiar with Goggins?
Yes, ma'am.
So former Navy SEAL David Goggins, he calls it the accountability mirror, right? And I believe in the power of that. And, you know, he talks about kind of taping up, you know, sticky notes and things like that to go even further there. But like, the power of looking at yourself in the mirror, looking yourself in the eye, and really challenging yourself and being honest with yourself about where you are in this moment, and what you're taking responsibility for, what you can control. And what you can control is your attitude, your effort, you know, your persistence, right? Your refusal to quit. That's what you can control. And so that's what I try to do when I'm in those challenging situations. Control what I can control, and hold myself accountable if I'm not holding up my end of the bargain.
Thank you. No, that's awesome. And you touched on some great points, ma'am. And I agree. And I try to embody a lot of those things that you named, definitely, to make sure I keep going with, you know, whatever your goal may be or whatever your struggle may be. So, ma'am, you have a unique perspective of being a cadet and then coming back to teach cadets. So what were the key differences or hurdles amongst minority cadets in your generation when you were actually there as a cadet versus when you came back to be the head of the Department of English?
You know, so a lot of it's the same, right? I think, you know, at the core of those common challenges is that sense of belonging, and you know, there's been a lot of work done by cadets and faculty at the academy on that sense of belonging, especially for underrepresented groups there. And so I think that's the same. One big difference is cell phones, and really just the connection to the outside world, and you know, kind of even beyond that, just our access to information has grown exponentially since, you know, the 25 years I was at the academy, right? And so kind of working this back into that MLK quote, because we have this access to all of this information, cadets have to confront these issues of social justice, because they're just exposed to it, right? I mean, there's kind of no way to escape or ignore when these social justice issues come up. And it's kind of become a part of all of our collective consciousness, right? That's where that woke comes from, right? That we're right, that we are opening up our collective consciousness to these social justice issues. And so, when I returned to teach, especially the second time I returned to teach, I kind of understood my role as a instructor, as a professor, and as a mentor, as to create a safe space for cadets to engage with those issues. All cadets, right, to engage with those issues, and also to encourage a kind of collective investment in learning. Learning about our history, learning about the nation's history, and really thinking about how each of our service fits into those histories, right? The relationship between the life of service that we've chosen to these histories, and to these issues that we're all responding to and dealing with, right? Um, I don't remember having to deal with all of that and reconcile all of those kinds of things as a cadet. And so in a lot of ways, I think that cadets nowadays are much more socially aware, and more sophisticated citizens than we were maybe 20 years ago.
Awesome, absolutely. Thank you. Those are some good words and good inputs that you gave to that question, man. And just touching on the head of Department of English and Fine Arts, just overall, how was that experience for you? What would you take away?
Yeah, that experience was such a blessing, really. It's a very rare experience to be able to do that as a lieutenant colonel, which is what I was then. Those department head positions are held for the most part by congressionally nominated permanent professors.
Oh, wow.
And so rarely do you get the opportunity to kind of step into that position. And I was able to do that for 2 years because the permanent professor went to be the vice dean. And so to get the opportunity to serve in that role was just a gift. And so I tried to take full advantage of that gift. And I was able to serve on the dean's curriculum committee and help inform the modernization of the academy's curriculum. And as I mentioned before, able to offer a unique perspective that certainly was not reflected in most of the other permanent professors sitting around the table deciding on the curriculum. And so I think that helped make sure that we were um, inclusive in the curriculum that we created. So speaking of inclusiveness, I also got to serve as the Making Excellence Inclusiveness Chair, and really got to focus on how do we look at issues of diversity and inclusion within our own faculty, and how do we try to improve the diversity of our faculty, make our faculty and the courses that we teach more inclusive, to better meet our cadets' needs. And so I got some really cool opportunities to, at an institutional level, impact decisions that were made and how we were moving forward, as a faculty. But I love the teaching the most. I mean, that's always my favorite thing. I got to teach some really cool courses there that were centered in issues of gender and race. And I went out and actively recruited outside of the English major so that we could, get interest from a wide group of people to come in and read some good books, but really read some good books so that we could tackle issues, of gender and race and other social issues that intersect, around all of our experiences. So that was neat stuff. But my favorite part of all of that was coming back from, a class or a meeting and whatnot, and finding cadets sitting outside my door, waiting to talk to me, most of the time wanting to just share some good news with me, or get a quick bit of advice. That relationship that I was able to have with cadets as a mentor, I still obviously maintain lots of those relationships to this day. And that's what continues to feed and fuel me, even now. So.
Yes, ma'am. I was just about to say that. And like, even hearing you speak now, I didn't understand the gravity of that position that you were in. And you just even hear now, like the process normally to get someone appointed to that position. I remember being a cadet and just, sitting in your office and talking to you. I'm just like, yeah, I'm just going to talk to Colonel Pipes. Like, I'm talking to the department head, for English and fine arts. So it was definitely a cool experience. And I know, now speak for all the cadets, we definitely appreciated you making that time for us, and just seeing you in that role and on that platform was definitely monumental. And, you were trying to recruit me to English as well.
Yeah.
But no, it was so awesome just to see that and have that experience. So I don't know, a bunch of me and my classmates and even people older and younger than me were definitely trying to get up to Colonel Pipes after classes, just trying to talk to you. So
Yep, that was great.
it was awesome, man. So switching gears a little bit, man. So when I was in tech school, I'm a 21R logistics readiness officer. In my tech school, they kind of show us our career progression and our career path, and we kind of build up to squadron commander, and then it just kind of ends.
Yeah.
My instructor was just very, he was a retired group commander, MSG. He was a 21R, and he was just telling us, he's like, yeah, the career path really sets you up to be squadron commander. Then after that, it's like on you, and majority of people probably just going to retire. And I hear that's the norm for a lot of non-rated career fields, especially when you're trying to make that rank of 06 and even higher. So I was going to ask you, can you touch on your path and your grind to make 06 as a non-rated officer?
Sure. Yeah. I think one thing I will say is I think one of the reasons why that career path kind of ends with squadron command is that you really have to have a squadron command, a successful squadron command, to make 06, right? That's one of those milestones that you really do need to have to get to the next level. And so in a lot of ways, it's kind of like, hey, if you can get here, then and do that successfully, then assuming you've got school done and you've done a couple other things, then you have a decent shot of making 06. But I think to get there, it's all about performance. And I've long ago, I think the career pyramids can be useful, but because I never really followed one, because I spent so much time in academia, I don't put a whole lot of stock in them either. And so I always, caution folks to not be so rigid that you don't look for other opportunities to really impact this Air Force, because it might not fit exactly into this career path pyramid that you've been given. You just got to know that if you kind of step outside of that, you have to advocate for yourself and fight for opportunities and as you make your way forward. But the best thing that anyone can do, wanting to be an 06 or above, is perform. I mean, it always comes down to performance. If you perform, that will be reflected in, the reports that are written, the opportunities that are offered to you, the advocacy that you receive, and it will lead to things like command and other opportunities moving forward. So I think it's pretty simple. Just perform. You really perform and do the best that you can.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that. And that's good to hear, because I know oftentimes, I've heard people getting told that if you take these like cool opportunities that's outside of your kind of career progression, you're hurting yourself essentially. And you're gonna, in lack of a better phrase, pay for it later when you're competing against your peers for certain opportunities and for command, and even going further than lieutenant colonel. So it's just great to hear that you can take these other routes. And you said, like you said, you spent a lot of time in academia and still able to get to that end goal, because I feel like a lot of people do not tell you that perspective or distinguish that.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of truth to that, right? I mean, it certainly makes it a little bit more difficult, especially for me. I spent half my career outside of my career field, up to the point of being a squadron commander. And so, sure, that's gonna make it a little bit more difficult for me to get a squadron command within my career field, right? But knowing that, you can start to create your own narratives and advocate for yourself in different spaces. And so I was glad that people told me that, because then I knew what the battlefield looked like, and I could prepare myself to to fight, and that's what I did. There's a little luck that goes in there, but I think that's true with anybody, that is successful. There's always a little bit of luck that's involved there. But I always made my intentions known as I was moving through my career that, and for me, it was never, I want to be an 06. For me, it was, I want to be a squadron commander. I always knew I wanted to be a squadron commander. And I told every supervisor that I ever had that I want to be a squadron commander. You know what I mean? And for me, that opportunity showed itself to be everything that I thought it was going to be. It was awesome. Loved every minute of it.
That's great to hear. Thank you for that, man. So how are you able to balance family life and having a successful military career? I know a lot of people are wondering that, even me as a young, first lieutenant, like how I'm thinking, I just gave myself a
don't demote yourself.
Yes, ma'am. But I know that's something I always think about, like with assignments and opportunities, deployments, is like, how does a family play a part in all this? So can you touch on that?
Yeah. So, this reminds me of it was a brief, but meaningful conversation that I had with now retired Major General George. And we were standing in a receiving line at the Pentagon. And somehow this conversation about balance came up. And he said, I don't really think of it as balance, because, if you think about a scale as being balanced, it's kind of both things are equal, right? He's like, there's never been a moment in my life where I've been able to give everything equal attention. You know what I mean? And so, he was saying, I think about it more in terms of, am I giving each competing interest, in my life, the attention it needs in this moment, right? So there, and I believe that, in life there are seasons, right? So I kind of approach, life as there's different seasons, right? And so if you kind of combine those two things, then it really becomes a question about, are you able to prioritize and assess what you have going on in your life and be able to allocate the right amount of time to kind of meet those different needs that you have, right? And so some moments, some seasons, you're going to need to invest a whole lot into work, because you need to make a milestone, achieve a milestone, you need to meet a deadline. But there are going to be other times where you're going to really need to invest in your family or in your friends, right? And you may not be able to give as much time to the work. But this idea that we can somehow give equal time to all things, I think, can actually work to make us feel like we're failing, right? Because it's almost unachievable, right? And so being a little bit more realistic about it, for me, it's more about, I'm constantly assessing, what do I have on my plate? What needs, what amount of time or investment? How do I plan that out with the time that I have available to me, to try to get after the things that I have going on? But it rarely feels like balance.
That's a very good perspective that I never really thought of or really heard, to be honest. So thank you for sharing that. So, ma'am, in 06, you got a PhD. What's one thing you still aspire to accomplish in your career?
Yeah, so I'm working on a passion project right now. I'm working on a book that's a collection of essays, and the book is really kind of an investigation about the import of young adult fiction written for and about Black and brown youth. And I came to this, as I mentioned before, the book Brown Girl Dreaming. I came to this as my children, we have read books together, and seeing them respond to these texts and really seeing them, these books as lifelines for them, especially as we've moved, I don't know how many times now, 7, I think they've moved maybe 6 or 7 times themselves, right? And kind of moving from school to school and having to find new friends and just go through those very difficult phases of being a military child, how these books, and specifically these books that are written for and about Black and brown youth have become lifelines for them, things that connect them to kind of these other other imaginings of life and experiences, and how they found solace in these texts. And so it got me thinking about, how do these books function in the consciousness of our youth, right? And as I mentioned before, the first time I read a book by a Black woman was when I was a sophomore in college. And so the amount of literature since then, like in the last 20 years, that is now available to my kids that really wasn't available to me, probably even to you, growing up, is amazing and wonderful. There's so many good books out there targeting our Black and brown youth, that are just really wonderful texts. And so just thinking about how are these this kind of fairly new genre of young adult fiction, how does it function in the consciousness of our youth, in a way that might help to empower them, might help to give them a stronger sense of belonging in their communities, in this country, that helps them achieve their dreams, in their futures. So that's a passion project I'm working on right now. We'll see how it goes.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And that sounds amazing. Like, what's your time frame? When do you think it'll be done? Or like, what makes it done? Is there a certain number you're reaching for, or a certain amount of time?
Yeah, so I'm in the process of collecting. So it's an academic book. So I'm collecting essays from different academics that I'm compiling, and trying to frame in terms of a coordinated book project. So I'm in the process of doing that right now. So hopefully in the next year or so.
Okay, awesome. And is it just you, or do you have a team?
It's me, and then all of the people that are submitting essays to me. So
Okay.
all my contributors. Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, we look forward, once it's published, to go ahead and get a copy of that. We'll make sure that the Way of Life Alumni Organization, puts that out. But we're excited for that. That's awesome. And as we begin to wrap up here, the interview, we always ask our guests to recommend a book and then a final word of advice or encouragement. So, ma'am, what would be yours?
So I'm just going to recommend the book that I'm currently reading, which is President Obama's A Promised Land. And it's fantastic, as you might expect. But my real recommendation is just that people find time to read, and we're so busy. There's so much going on. And we spend a whole lot of time on, social media and TikTok and all these things. And so we I think we just gotta make sure that we're scheduling, if it's 30 minutes before bed or whatever that looks like for you, for each individual person, but time to read something that you're interested in, something that might, help you professionally or achieve a goal, or is just fun to read, a good novel, beach read, whatever it is. I just, I'm a proponent of people reading consistently,
Man. And then what about any advice or encouragement, that you have currently to cadets at the Academy?
Yeah, well, stay strong. I mean, especially right now. I mean, this is a tough year, and because my husband is at the prep school right now, I'm aware of the challenges that they have, and it's a strange year. It's been a strange year for all of us, and so I think the cadets right now just have to stay strong and remember the end goal, and keep kind of working towards it. The motto that I had when I was a squadron commander, and I absolutely stole this from my husband, is wake up running. And quite literally, because I'm a runner, and I do try to wake up running in some capacity every morning and get that good workout in. Helps me clear my mind and get ready for the day. But it's also a mindset, right? Like, I think we even the cadets, it's easy to get bogged down with all the responsibilities that cadets have, with all of the challenges, with all of the assignments that are due, you know, all of those things. It's I think it's easy to lose sight of how blessed we all really are. You know what I mean? To be in the positions that we are in. And to kind of not take the experiences that we're in, as hard as they might be, for granted. And so this wake up running mindset is one where you kind of wake up grateful every day, for you know, the blessing of the life that you've been given, and then use that gratefulness to um, uh, you know, to motivate and energize making this world a better place. Do, you know, studying a little bit harder for that test, you know, you know, given, you know, I tell my son, lead with effort at practice, right? You know, going out there and giving everything that you can each and every day. You know, so adopting that wake up running mindset in everything that you do, I think is one way that I found helpful to live my life.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that. Wake up running. I've never heard that before. It's awesome. And I really think I'm going to start trying to embody that as well. But I know right now, like the cadets just, you know, with, you know, going through the academy by itself as, you know, a person of color is, or any minority in general is, you know, is a difficult task. And you may struggle with that sense of belonging that you touched on in the interview. But I couldn't imagine doing it right now where, you know, it's like virtual. Some people are living in the dorm, some people are off base. Like I've never taken a final virtual, you know, except for grad school, but I couldn't imagine doing that undergrad. Like I was in class, I was physically in class, struggling to pay attention. I couldn't imagine being on a screen with my teacher.
Yeah.
So,
You know, I think it's tough, but you know, these moments also, I think, show us, and I continue to be amazed at how we adapt and overcome. You know, when I think about, you know, where we were kind of in March when this whole pandemic thing kind of entered our consciousness, and how quickly we have adapted to this new environment, um, to keep ourselves going, right? And to me, that's a real testament to the strength of our will. You know what I mean? And so it's got to be immensely challenging, but I am hopeful, knowing that we adapt and we overcome, and we figure out a way to get it done.
yes, ma'am, we will. Thank you. We really appreciate you. And I guess we here at the Way of Life Alumni Organization really appreciate your time and appreciate you, you know, pouring into this interview and pouring into the viewers that are going to see this. And we just love that you shared your unique perspective. So thank you so much, man. We really appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Cozy. Thank you so much. It's been my honor as always, and I just I appreciate you guys always showing me the love, and you know I love all y'all.
Awesome, man. We love you too. Thank you so much.
All right.